Well, welcome back to Think or Be Eaten, and with us is an old visitor. You've heard him here and with Randy and with Derek and Sharon. It's William Ramsey, and of course, he first came on with all of us, I believe, when he came out with the book Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order. He's come on today to talk to, I believe, one finished piece and one that he's working on. It looks like it's going to be a series. Some interesting stuff, and also some I guess, coincidences that we talked about off mic, which it just doesn't get any better. So, William, thanks a lot for coming back. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be back on.
All right. Now, you sent out that the first article entitled Temples of the Illumined Ones, the Rockefeller Buildings. Can we springboard off that?
Absolutely. I mean, I basically, when I was doing my research, I just kept seeing these, basically for my first book, I kept seeing these references to Prometheus, and it kind of, and also just the stuff that I learned about WTC, and then I started to see correlations between these large building complexes in New York that were all affiliated to the Rockefeller family. And so I've just been kind of researching, and I really almost have only scratched the surface. I've never been to them on site, but I've just been able to take a look at the pictures of the occult sculptures that are, basically placed within the building complexes. And, what I saw was, I just wanted to put them all together and just show people that these are more than, or were, in this case of the World Trade Center, were and are more than mere building complexes, but they're also designed for specific reasons, and those reasons are kind of occultic, New World Order type reasons.
I walked past the building I don't know how many times. I actually got to skate there once. Indifferent, ignorant of all that was around me, but I guess most people are like that. In a way, you really can't blame them because they don't understand the big picture, and until somewhere in along the line, a hole gets poked in that wall, which may not even be put up by their own devices, you really don't understand. And I guess in some cases, William, maybe it's good for some folks, that they don't know what kind of evil they live every day in. And you can understand that too. For some, it would be, I think, too much. For those who know the Lord, I mean, you have the armor, but it's really amazing just when you get aware how in your face it is.
Agreed. I mean, for me, I didn't know anything about the occult or anything about numerology, and, for me, it was like I'm in a process of awakening, really, and just seeing more and more and letting it kind of, enter into my mind stuff that I've seen forever. And I've seen this Prometheus statue used many, many more times in the backdrops of films and pictures and events. I think it was used as a backdrop. Giuliani was there greeting the torchbearer from the Olympics. I think it was in 2004 on their way to Salt Lake City.
The light bearer.
So, yeah. So, so it's been used in all kinds of ceremonies, films. So that's just like the Prometheus. But when you realize that these huge buildings were built with these occult, kind of high Masonic, Mystery Babylon references and architectural symbols, it's pretty amazing, and it shows this kind of occultism is affiliated with the elite, and it goes back, before at least my time, it goes way back.
I'm just going to ask you real quick. Have you ever been to the WTC complex prior to 2001? No.
I've been in New York, but I'd never actually been on site there.
I'm just going to run this by it, but I mean, again, there's that one sculpture that's there. Would this be necessarily a Prometheus? Also, the supporting of the world, I think it is on one's back.
The Atlas? Is that the WTC or the?
Yeah, it's the Atlas.
Yeah,
right?
The WC is the Great Spherical Caryatid.
Right.
So the Great Spherical Caryatid was made by Koenig, and its purpose was the kind of binding together of nation states. Its stated purpose. One of the interesting things is that it's called a caryatid, but it's not a caryatid in a very definitive sense. A caryatid is a kind of a human being, a pillar that's shaped like a human being holding up a temple. So the application of the word caryatid to this circular globe connotes to me this meaning that this is more than just a couple of buildings. This is a temple, and I think that is the purpose of the whole building or architectural design of the WTC.
Well, I was there once. I was in the building once, I got to tell you, and there's something that's not, and I don't mean to get spooky about this, but there was something I never felt good about, the towers. And to be honest with you, they're somewhat scary. When I was there, I looked up, and I know vertigo is something you're supposed to get when you're up on top, I think, right? But they were so monstrous, and as you stood there, I don't know if you ever got that experience, especially perhaps as a young child, I don't know. But I kept looking up, and there was a point at which I didn't want to look up anymore. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that those are huge buildings. They were the biggest buildings built for their time. They stood out above and beyond an already sizable skyline. And they were very abnormally built, constructed. The levers that had to be pulled to get them built, nobody really wanted them. I mean, the whole history of the WTC complex is very peculiar.
It is indeed, and what happens is too, across time, unless you go back and take a look in accounts that were contemporary to the building of the tower, even when they were deciding whether this was going to happen or not, most people didn't want it. Downtown merchants were completely opposed to it. Even some council people were. And in a PBS documentary called Center of the World, some old journalists from that time recall kind of whimsically that it doesn't matter who was against it. In certain terms, they just said, no. Well, of course, Nelson was part of this, but David he got things done. And at that time, also, Nelson was governor, I believe, and that went up against most people's wishes. Of course, the Rockefellers also donated land on which the UN was built, and he wanted this, obviously, David, as a World Trade Mart. But I have to wonder too sometimes, William, with the two towers. We've talked about this with regard to your book. But, I mean, are we supposed to look at those towers, too, in a way that recalls numerology, like 11?
I would say that they do. I mean, I think that they are a big 11, and in the way that in my reading of the deeper occult is that the 11 isn't merely, it's definitely a power number, but it also represents kind of duality. It represents, it's basically an ideogram, not so much as perceived as a number within the Arabic numeral system, but also this kind of opposites, which is a magical symbol of opposites coming together. So in the magician doing his magical work by his own will, and you see the triumph or the importance of the will in the magician, is to bring together these opposites, whether it's, fire and ice. These are high kind of Illuminati or magical concepts, is my understanding. For example, the 5 and the 6 of the pentagram and the hexagram, the whole idea is to bring the microcosm and the microcosm together. So in some ways, these symbols, the towers symbolize this kind of duality or, coming together of opposites, an ideogram, as Crowley would say. And, they're 110 stories tall, so that's an 11. And then you can look at all the numbers and numerology that were inlaid into the 9/11 event. I mean, it's just all there, the 11, 93, 77, 175. So you see that event. So I would say, and then there's another element of like the Masonic view, which is those are the Boaz and Jachin, the two pillars that are associated with the temple in Jerusalem, and also the pillars of Hercules, which was kind of like going out into the new world, or this kind of gateway or symbolic gateway. And so there's a lot of occult interpretations that I think do hold when you see these buildings as kind of more temple structures than mere, functional, pragmatic, office buildings.
When I watched that get built, I remember most, markedly, was when I was going to a high school. I'd been in a junior high, so we went to this high school, which sat atop the Palisades in New Jersey. It was Cliffside Park High School. And after football, waiting for the bus to take us to the sending district, which is the town of Palisades Park, we all stand out there and watch how much progress they made. And we all said to ourselves, somebody's going to fly a plane into that. Because as they got bigger, it almost was like somebody saying, come on, give me a shot. Do you know what I mean? Because it was so monstrous.
Yeah.
It was like, come on, you're just asking for a slap upside the head. But, but I looked at them, I have to say, as columns. I couldn't really understand what it was a gateway to, perhaps, or what it protected. Not in those days, in any shape, way, or form. But there's also some information to the fact that those towers were compromised, not by this, they came out with all these theories about the concrete was bad and aluminum in the I don't know. But I had a guy on that was a architectural photographer who I think got invited to a certain meeting with regard to the towers by mistake, as he calls it, but he was there. And this is an aside, but he had said that those towers are always buffered by winds. It just doesn't stop. That's, the thermals go through there as well. And what was happening is somewhere down below, the torque was being taken by a number of floors, and it got to the point where they were saying, listen, this thing's going to go over unless it gets deconstructed. And what this gentleman said was that, the EPA was going to tell Rockefeller and the boys that it had to go down. I'm like, well, I don't think you have to tell them anything. You're not going to tell Rocky anything. But I'm just wondering if there is some truth to the fact that if something had to happen, why not knock down the towers? You deconstruct it, and you also set us off on a course more closely to world government because of the fear of terrorism. Do you want to address that at all, William, or did you hear anything?
Well, yeah, it's almost as if for me, my conclusions of just looking at everything and the temple nature of this is almost like they were built to be brought down. So whoever built them didn't want them to last that long anyway, So I see it as more of a long-term plan, and I don't like that conclusion. I don't even like the conclusion that 9/11 is an inside job, and I don't like the conclusion that there's occult satanic elements to it, but another conclusion is looking at all this is like, well, why would you build this monstrosity that's not very functional, and you have to take multiple elevators to get to the top, and it sticks out like a sore thumb? Why would you do this? And for me, it's almost like they built it to bring it down.
And I just got to ask you because you piqued my curiosity. I don't call it an inside job for my own purposes. Why do you not like also the term inside job?
The term inside job, I guess for me it's inside and outside. There's so many people who are interested in seeing this event take place for all types of reasons, So
Agreed.
Businesses and defense departments will keep the cover story going because they know they're going to get tons of money, which they have. They were reinfused with billions and billions of dollars, so they're going to hold the story. The corporate media is interested in having people watch and, cowering people and into fear. And the Zionists see this as a element of benefit for them to malign the Muslim world and, go into Iraq. And that plan was there before 9/11 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that I think there were statements that they were going to go into Iraq even before George Bush's first presidency. So I think that inside job, I think is it's more than that. I think that it definitely is a conspiracy and definitely a pre-planned event. And I think that if you see my movie Occult Hollywood, there's a lot of sequences where the Twin Towers are used very suspiciously. In particular, the End of Days movie, I think we talk about that with Schwarzenegger, where the devil appears right in between the Twin Towers in the background in this very strange placement that really connotes an inside understanding of some kind of long-term plan, I think. So, I don't know, inside job for me just doesn't
me either.
It doesn't contain all the meanings.
No, because and I was going to say, just from the standpoint of you take a look at the previous administrations, I guess you could argue about what might have been under Carter's watch. Maybe not, but certainly under, let's see, did Daddy Bush have anything go on between 88 and 92? I don't think so. But under Clinton, there was obviously two things, and that was the Murrow building bombing and also the bombing of the Trade Center.
Yeah, 93.
Yeah, and then we go on to Shrub, and of course Shrub had obviously 9/11, 2001. So I don't think any administration is actually free from not being involved in any of this. And I don't like inside job too, because it sounds like it was just Bush's administration, and it goes way beyond that. I think you'd agree. So.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I didn't talk about the movie either. Do you want to just apprise people of what you all have available now? We talked about the book. Now you have the movie too, which I'm sorry, I got to apologize. I had forgotten about. So can you speak to that right now?
Yeah, I think I've got two movies. I made a documentary on Crowley and kind of Included in that documentary is basically some information regarding the people Crowley has influenced, kind of his disciples, Leary, Hubbard, the bands and movies. And then I did kind of a first volume of Occult Hollywood, which basically has a bunch of films and other directors who have included a variety of these kind of deep occult numerological meanings and statues in their films. For example, it's Oliver Stone, Stanley Kubrick, and what's his name, Roman Polanski. So those are available on my website, www.occult911.com.
Okay, so they can go to that website and they can access and or purchase the book, the DVDs that you're doing.
Yeah, I got to get a new website. I'm trying to upgrade my website, but I just don't seem to have the time, so I've got to put that together. But yeah, they're available now.
I got two more questions. Well, at least one before we go back to 30 Rock, and that is there's something else that's going on in New York, and I don't know your feelings about it, but the Empire State Building was up earlier. It did withstand an accidental bombing. I mean, not bombing, excuse me, but impact by a plane. It wasn't a military plane in the fog. So it was up there before the towers. It still exists there. Now, one thing, and of course, I lived how long in that area? Like 40 some odd years, and I never put this together. But I didn't know things then. One is that, let's face it, the Empire State Building is an obelisk, is it not?
It sure looks like it.
To me, it does. The second thing is, why did they call it the Empire State Building? Why is New York the Empire State? Or is...
Well, I think Empire State was a insurance company, as far as I know.
Oh, really?
They were the one who put it together, yeah.
Well, because I have to laugh, too, because, that building with the name Empire is in a state that of course, does what? I mean, not that Jersey is exempt from this, but it also harkens back...
the Empire State, right?
Huh? Yeah, well, yeah, New York.
Right.
York. York, right? Whatever you want to, whatever you want to do with it. But obviously, those colonies, for a lot of reasons, assumed names from the motherland. And but I think it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that the Empire State Building is the big, is now still the biggest thing in town. It's an obelisk that was there since what? I guess the 30s, and it's still there. And I wonder if there's anything that's sanctified about that as well. I don't know, but at any rate.
I haven't studied it, but I mean, the thing is, the more I study a lot of these buildings, the more you just, when you look at it through the prism of what is occult and what's their deeper meaning, there always seems to be something there.
Well, here's what I want to ask you, too. If you find anything interesting about this kind of propensity to attach to this particular myth, what do you know, or can you hazard a guess, or do you know for a fact, why the whole Prometheus legend is so attractive, I would say, to occultists in particular, or in general, and the Rockefellers in particular?
Yeah, I think that Prometheus is this symbolic. Prometheus was a titan who stole fire from the gods in Greek mythology and gave it to man. So he was kind of the symbol of civilization and the arts. And the concept of Prometheus as the devil has always been attractive to Luciferians, and it even goes back before Blavatsky. But Blavatsky seems to be one of the people who spoke most about Lucifer. I mean, of Prometheus as Lucifer. But I think one of the poets, I think it was Shelley, wrote a poem about Prometheus, and he lived a very libertine kind of Crowleyan lifestyle, I guess. Died young, and he was an associate of Lord Byron. But so that concept of this symbolic representation of the devil as Prometheus goes back, and Blavatsky herself, said that Prometheus is hurled down to the bottomless pit. So there's this kind of symbolic, representation of Prometheus as as kind of Lucifer. So these allegorical similarities. And then she even said that hence the allegory of Prometheus, who steals the divine fire so as to allow men to proceed consciously on the path of spiritual evolution. So here she is basically perverting the devil as this kind of great teacher of humanity, which I guess if you're a worshiper the devil. That, I guess, is it. But then it's interesting that she calls humans the most perfect of animals into a potential god. So here's the same kind of occult notion of man as God, which is a total farce. But I guess if you want to believe you're a god, you can, even though, people get old and die. I haven't seen one of these occultists ever outlive, 80 years or whatever. But so she referred to the Prometheus myth, and then that Prometheus statue is gilded in right there in the center of the Rockefeller Center, and people skate in front of it. And it's pretty amazing. I think that the statement behind it that's etched in granite is pretty interesting, and a lot of people are not familiar with it. But what it says is, Prometheus, teacher in every art, brought the fire that hath proved to mortals a means to mighty ends. So there's even this connotation with the statue that the devil can help you achieve and overcome. And I think that you can kind of see that within the Rockefeller family and their view towards other people and towards their business. I mean, they were survival of the fittest, some of the most ruthless people out there, and really operated as an elite for over 100 years in this country. It's interesting, they go back. The original Rockefeller was a snake oil salesman, and
what, from upstate New York, was it?
Pardon me?
From upstate New York, was he?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he was actually like the classic snake oil salesman who went around on like this pull cart and sold bogus oils and ointments to people. And that's where the Titan, or John Rockefeller, the original, founder of Standard Oil, basically learned all the stuff from him. And his father told him never to trust anybody. Everybody lies. Just all kinds of pretty nasty stuff. And John put it into practice and basically created one of the greatest monopolies in human history.
Yeah, I agree with you without a doubt. And thinking about occultists who have gone deep into octogenarianism, I don't have to say that word many times, who are 80 or older. David's right up there. I mean, he's got to be the last.
I think he's 95.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's old.
Well, and one thing, I'm sure it might be as easy as that he has contacts. But, I mean, I look at him when he spoke at some of the meetings of groups we've never even heard of on C-SPAN, and I looked at him. He doesn't even use glasses. I mean, he just, and honestly, take a look at Kissinger or some of these other characters. I mean, I got to wonder if they get blood transfusions every day, So.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, they have access to a level of healthcare that's beyond the standard American healthcare, so they get the best of the best of the best, and they never have really worked a hard day of labor in their life. So, their whole, they get all the best food, all the best massages, the best sleep.
Well,
so it's easy to live that long. When you live as an elite, you can if you play your cards right, live a long life.
I would agree with that description. I look at Kissinger, and he looks like some kind of like barnacle that just like hung on. I really don't know what his claim to fame was, really. I mean, from his roots. But you look at
affiliated with the Rockefellers. That's his claim to fame.
Yeah.
He's just a Rockefeller minion, just like Brzezinski, the Bush family. If you trace all these people back, it all ends up in part on the Rockefeller doorstep. It's pretty amazing.
And I don't mean to be harder on them than one should, but I have to admit, when I hear people, run their mouth, especially in Patriot Radio, about how we have the New World Order on the run, da-da-da-da, I mean, I'm looking at what the Rockefellers accomplished. What do you want to say, liberally, since the 1860s, maybe?
Yeah.
When John D. really got in gear and avoided getting involved in the Civil War. And then got involved in petroleum, which led also to pharmaceuticals. And now you look today, and at what is probably the two most utilized elements that there are, commodities, if you will, and that is obviously petroleum and pharmaceuticals.
Indeed.
And then you look also at the beginnings of Rockefeller, or John D. Rockefeller's empire building, and you have the Morgans were involved in that also. And then the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts jump in, and they're referred to as the robber baron families. But, I mean, I have to say that was probably the death of the Republic, which probably wasn't on all that great a keel anyway. But once those individuals gathered their billions, there was no stopping them. Your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I mean, there were fights against these monopolies. There's this function in the law called antitrust, which nobody's probably ever heard of and certainly haven't heard of in the current Department of Justice. But they actually tried to break up the trust, which they did. They saw these massive corporate entities as a threat, and wisely, and they had a tremendous influence, because what they did is once Rockefeller controlled all the oil, then he got into banking, and the current Chase Bank is basically called the Rockefeller Bank, and it has a not so cleverly concealed swastika on my bank card that I use, because I used to be a member of Washington Mutual, and they got bought out in this kind of art of war stealth banking crisis / bank war that only a few banks and a few brokerages houses came on top, and the other ones just got wasted because they didn't have the political pull. And so you still see the effects, and these are serious effects. I mean, this banking crisis was all structured, staged, and fully managed and manipulated at the highest level to have an outcome that benefited a select few, and one of the select few is Chase Manhattan Bank, otherwise known as the Rockefeller Bank. So, people who want to yap and yip about conspiracies and stuff like that, if they just look at the facts, they speak for themselves.
No, and you have in that article also one of the quotes that I think is probably the most famous for folks like us who get it, about Rockefeller saying what he is, obviously and unabashedly a proponent of, and he calls it internationalism, but we would call it what? World domination.
Right, yeah. He basically says, what you're living in today is what he talked about, what David Rockefeller talked about, which is a supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers. And what he said specifically is that is surely preferable to national auto-determination practice in past centuries. So, in 2001, what you see is a supranational intellectual elite and bankers who are basically trying to wrest control from people who are living in this paradigm of national sovereignty. I'm not even adding like a moral context to it, as whether national sovereignty is good or bad, but basically you have other people who are living in those countries who don't even think they're part of that nation state. They actually believe that there's some supranational, their allegiance is more to a supranational entity or organization.
Have you ever heard of a person by the name of Philander Knox?
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, he should. I tell you what, I had done, I didn't write an article on this, but we had the Garciano e-zine, to which you contributed, thank you. There was something I wanted included, and I gave attribution to where it came from. But Philander Knox is a really interesting person, and he was the robber barons' lawyers. At the time, they were doing what they were doing, and Teddy Roosevelt came out, and with all the fist pumping and stuff, and said, we're going to bust these trusts and all this other stuff. So on the surface, everybody's all behind Teddy, and the robber barons are well aware this is going to happen. So while he's going out there and the government does its thing, Philander Knox and the robber barons are finding ways around it. It almost seems to be that what they did was, even though it looked like they were busting their trusts, they survived, obviously, with the help of Knox. And then what they effectively did was stop anybody else from challenging them. So in other words, the horse was out of the barn and Teddy closed the doors. So that's one look at it. Also, he was a personage, a principal, in ramming through the income tax, which was not effectively ratified, but Knox says, yeah, it is, see you later. That's exactly what happened. He was Secretary of State under Taft. So,
it's amazing. The crimes that have happened before our time that haven't been remedied are astonishing,
But what a great first name.
Yeah, he lived up to his name.
Didn't
How
he?
do you get that name?
I know. Was he born for this? And it's also interesting, too, he came out of Ohio, which so did John D. The one thing I find interesting...
So did the Bushes. The Bush family goes all the way back to Ohio.
Colvin has said that, too. I don't pick him up at that point, but you're right. Yeah.
The father of Prescott is from Ohio.
Well, what's interesting is that on the Internet you could find a JPEG of an article in a Cincinnati newspaper in Ohio that actually spoke to Harriman and Prescott Bush being indicted for trading with the enemy. So, I always wondered, why Cincinnati? Why am I looking at this? Well, it's Ohio. McKinley also came out of Ohio, and the law firm that he was in, it was where Knox cut his teeth. But something isn't, there's something else going on with McKinley to be assassinated. I don't know that you believe that, once again, a lone anarchist did it. There was something else going on there.
Nothing else. Nothing in politics happens by chance. That's my general axiom that I apply. So if there is a random killing, I mean, it's outside the line. Typically, they've been finding lone nuts to do killings.
Well,
for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I mean, it goes all the way back to, what's the guy who shot Lincoln? It was just one guy. Well, it didn't turn, it was a full conspiracy, and they kind of, play that down. But it was a total conspiracy to kill Lincoln.
But think about this
involving
also.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, and I mean, again, just to frame this, think about America, when was McKinley assassinated? I think it was what?
1904?
98? 01?
Something like that, right around the turn of the century.
But here you have an assassination in 65. You have Garfield's assassination in 81. And now we're not that far down the road. And it's like, did anybody learn by past mistakes what to do? And then you have some guy in a line at the Buffalo exposition, whatever you want to call it, who wants to shake McKinley's hand, and then he starts to wrap his hand in a towel. Do you think that the Secret Service agents, which they had at the time, might have said, let's talk to this guy? No, he goes up to McKinley and shoots him. Give me a break.
Yeah,
I know it's crazy, but I mean that's an interesting period of time when you think from 65 onward, the assassinations and the things that took place. It's something that Americans don't think too much about, and probably.
Well, they should, because so many of these people on their way to power have killed. If you look at Johnson in Texas, he had his own personal hitman who killed about 10 people on the way to power. Look at Clinton and how many bodies showed up in Arkansas. I mean, there's just bodies everywhere. When you really look at a lot of these guys on their quest for American power, the most powerful, political figure in the world, arguably, they're littered with just tons of murders. I mean, it's astonishing.
Yes,
I'm gonna write an article just called "Kill for Power" and just show people how many people have died under these presidents that are clear political killings, and they're still taking place today.
No doubt. I was just looking at this. I had not seen this. I don't. If you would like to speak to it, the artwork that's entitled "Oculus," the eye. Where was that placed? That was on the flooring of one of the WTCs.
Yeah, it was on the entrance to the underground subway system there. So it was like it was on Chambers Street at the World Trade Center. So they had the single eye radiating, and the one eye is this kind of very important symbol in the occult, and it symbolizes Horus and who was the hawk-headed god, one-eyed god, and that's like a symbol of Satan. So you always see that one eye, and that's on the back of the dollar bill, and it's just everywhere, so.
Well, remember, again, growing up in New York, we had the three networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and I never thought about it, but do you remember CBS's logo?
Yeah, it's the eye. It's all seeing eye.
And CBS, it's interesting, too, because early on, they were the pioneers in TV, and they seem more or less to move away from that. I'm not saying they abdicated or that it was taken away from them, but they've gone into radio. CBS seems to be one of the real heavy hitters in what is also a monopoly, the airwaves. But NBC moved in, and NBC seems to have taken the TV role while CBS has the radio thing. But in the beginning, it was William Paley and Cronkite, who I believe both were intelligence officers in World War II, that began CBS.
So it was Bush. Bush Senior, Prescott Bush was involved in the formation of CBS. He was on the board.
And now we have TV. I would think for the most part. I mean, I have to say between the three networks, I think NBC is the 700-pound gorilla. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean they're all big. I think that they're all still influential. People are still kind of glued in. Their influence is waning with the increasing abundance of stuff that's on the internet. But they're still out there. I think that they really have only captured and retain kind of the more moronic level of American discourse, or people who will listen to that. So,
well, what I find interesting, and I think this is an extension of what Rockefeller has done regarding TV in the morning. The Today Show has expanded exponentially. I mean, it used to be a 2-hour thing. Now it's like 5. And, it is probably one of the biggest opinion shapers. And, of course, it's so early in the morning that they'll get to you first, and they'll get to you mostest with whatever's going on.
When you're at your least sentient, probably, too.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you something that's not related. I just want your opinion about it because, obviously, we all trust you. I have often wondered why they began this. But you have news shows now that give you, obviously, the video, and you're looking at people, and then we have the crawlers. And I've often wondered if the appearance of the crawlers and whatever information goes along them, in some way, shape, or form, I don't know if this is possible with the human brain, but if it just somehow unconsciously gets into your head. Have you ever thought about that at all? Or
yeah, I mean, I view everything that comes across the TV as, of invading your basically conscious brain, your liminal brain, and your subliminal brain, at certain levels. So how much you intake on that stuff, I don't know. But, you sit down passively in front of a television, you might want to think 2 or 3 times about what you're watching. So I don't know how much that is. I really don't, but I suspect it's something.
Well, they wouldn't have done it unless it had some kind of, obviously, benefit for them. And I just find it's interesting because we went so many years without it. Now also we have crawlers and everything, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? It's a 3-ring circus.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I prefer the Internet. Basically, you can make the choice of what you want to watch. You can click to that. So, I very, very rarely watch, any major network television. And if I do, I record it so I don't have to put up with the corporate propaganda every 20 minutes out of a 60,
What I want to send you also, if you don't mind, I had saved these images because I thought they were interesting. A listener from Tennessee had a father, and this is going back early part of the 20th century, who was like one of your first, druggists, apothecaries.
Right.
And his drugstore did so well in selling certain prescriptions that came from Pfizer that they sent him 2 things, and one is a clock and one is a plaque. And the plaque, and I didn't know Pfizer did this. I don't even know if they do it now. I don't think they do. Was without a doubt the complete representation of the Eye of Horus. I mean, the whole 9 yards from the Egyptian thing.
Wow.
So I mean, I'm laughing because okay, here we are with pharmaceuticals at an early time, especially, and Pfizer just using the Eye of Horus. And I'll send you that so you can see it, and if you can possibly use it, by all means. But that
came all there. I mean, there was another company, gosh, I can't remember recall, but they had like a moon with stars. That was one of their big icon. They
Procter & Gamble?
Procter & Gamble, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know what? When that broke, we were all laughing at it. Just like, everybody laughs at tinfoil hat wearers.
Right.
And now I'm not laughing anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
well, also
that's one of the things that these guys do is laugh at you when they know that they're using these things, obviously, in public. What their first knee-jerk response when you confront somebody who has or is using a cult sign is to say you're insane, or laugh at you, So that's kind of the standard response. But once you figure it out and figure out what they're coming from, it makes it a lot easier to discern and see it in front of your face,
And I don't want to get into this now. I'm sure you don't either. But unfortunately, there's a lot of symbology in Christianity, and it has embraced quite a few occult symbols. So,
absolutely. I mean, I would say that particularly the Catholic Church is much more fond of occult symbolism. Rome is just suffused with obelisks all the way through that city, and I mean every other corner you go to or any central square has an obelisk that's probably been brought from Egypt. And the one in the central square there at St. Peter's, which was built after the original St. Peter's Cathedral, is a huge obelisk in a sundial. So it's kind of the obelisk is a phallic symbol. So you have this solar phallic, design that has at the center of a church that has really just dominated the earth, and to me is just a horror of Christianity. I think that it's referenced that way in Jesus Christ's revelation to John, and it's pretty amazing that even more so amazing is that the obelisk that rests there was brought from Egypt by none other than Caligula, the kind of one of the most destructive Roman emperors, of a very destructive era. So it seems pretty strange to have these Christians allow this to actually be a central motif or article in the center of their church. And I think it says a lot about the Catholic Church in particular that they would even allow that there. And then, you have the Pope wearing all kinds of strange regalia and weird fish hats and, stuff that, I think would be completely unbecoming a, woodworker from the Galilee. So,
well, I don't know how you feel about this, but you look at that mitered hat, and that does have some kind of connection with also Dagon, right?
Yeah, there's some kind of weird correlation to astrotheology and, I think the dog star and Sirius, and yes. that actually is something that's very important in the occult, is this kind of Sirius myth. And you see the Sirius dog star. They call Sirius the dog star, so you see all that kind of corporate logos and this kind of Sirius internet. It's kind of interesting that you have this basically a satellite that travels around the Earth that sends out information called Sirius, where it has the dog with the star on his eye. So you have this is just straight out of the occult. And then the whole Sirius myth is that these occultists have received information from Sirius. So these people who created the Sirius satellite for the music, they knew that, they almost put this thing out there almost as a kind of like a similar element to, or a similar correlation to this whole Sirius myth in the occult.
And I don't know if you remember this or not, too, but this is a hoot. The Army was thinking about placing quite high up dirigibles that would be surveillance tools. And
right.
The program, do you remember that, was named ISIS?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes, I remember that. It's just
it
in your
doesn't
face.
get any better than that.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's amazing.
I also I crack up too, tongue in cheek, but of some of the names that are becoming more popular for like the babies, the females are like ISIS now. That's great.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh
that.
no. Yeah. It's becoming a little bit more. It might be a 0.5% or 1%, but I didn't go to school like in 14 years of public education or whatever with any child, named ISIS, but I don't know how I got through.
We're entering into an era of witchcraft in the occult. It's going to start suffusing everything, and I don't see it being turned back. So it's going to be a pretty harrowing ride out for the next whenever.
Well, things are getting a little bit more obvious, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And the internet has helped, and the ability to talk to people of like-minded through the internet has helped because people are able to learn and kind of solidify their opinions with each other and, feel less atomized, I guess. So, I think that's helped a lot of people to exchange information and verify. So it allows people to verify facts and information that were kept hidden or secret.
Before we leave New York, the United Nations is interesting. Before we get into exactly what you dealt with regard to the United Nations, again, a Rockefeller construct, does the UN at all remind you of the monolith in 2001?
A little bit. It has that feel, this kind of flat plane and everything like that. So, it's an impressive structure.
And as a child, I was in New York, quite often. And I do remember, just as a child will do, taking a look at all the structures. And the UN, especially at that time, we're looking at the 50s and 60s, was completely different from anything else that was put up. Because it just is this very, what you would call thin-looking, elongated, monolith sitting right next to the East Harlem River Drive, the East River Drive. So, it was. There's no mistaking that. Plus, they had the lower level with the dome and all that. But, that building definitely, and I got to tell you something, too. William, what I've done is, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'd done a show years ago, and I just put up some of the audio of it on a Stuff and Things that I have up there. And it was a newsreel of, in 1945 or 46, of where would the UN finally be put up. Would it be Boston or would it be New York? So this was going back and forth. Obviously, New York finally won. But underneath it, believe it or not, are you with me there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Underneath it, though, is a soundtrack, just kind of undercurrent music. That is exactly what the Star Trek theme was when the first Star Trek in, 66 or so?
Interesting.
Listen if you can. It's at the very end of everybody. I mean, just take a look, listen if you can. It'll say a Star Trek theme in 1945 with the question mark. Go to the end of the audio and you'll hear it. I play it like 2 or 3 times. We've taken a look since then and we found out that the guy who did the composition, his name was Courage. Roddenberry gets involved with it because Roddenberry had written lyrics for it without Courage knowing, so that Roddenberry could get royalties without Courage knowing he did that. And Courage was obviously quite ticked off, and he left the show. But if you listen to that, you have to wonder. Here you hear what you hear in Star Trek in 1945 or 6, and of course, what are we dealing with? The UN is for a global federation. What was Star Trek but for a galactic federation? And
right.
I'm sure Roddenberry knew it, but just a little spooky thing. But getting into
Roddenberry seems to be a very high Mason as well. So,
exactly.
He definitely pushed that kind of meme through his show, and I think it was very attractive to people. I mean, almost like his show presupposed the joining of the world together. So he actually did something very clever, which is not like having the goal for it, but just assuming it had already taken place.
Not that I look at the old episodes for this, but now when I do see them, and they don't seem to be around as much as they were a couple of years ago, the reruns, you also will see a whole bunch of occult symbolism that are, for instance, ingrained in the chair that somebody sits in, in one of these other planets. So it's all over the place. And, of course, the first episode had, it was the trial of Captain Pike. Does Pike ring a bell?
No, that sounds familiar, yeah.
Right,
Albert Pike. Yeah, his name was Albert Pike, right?
Yeah.
I think his name was Albert Pike.
Captain Pike's first name, I don't know, was Albert, but...
I think it is actually Albert. If my memory serves me correctly, it is Albert.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's beautiful.
My gosh.
But talk about the United Nations, though, if you would, and especially about that meditation room, which is kind of eerie.
Well, like I said, I haven't actually been on site, so a lot of the stuff I haven't analyzed, but I just recalled when I was kind of writing about these Rockefeller buildings, one of the sequences from Mystery Babylon that William Cooper did, which was based on, one of them was just about the UN building, the meditation room, and what it represented. And I just put some of the information down from that the 1 hour program they had, but basically, the 72 is an important number. There supposedly are 72 chief demons that run the earth underneath Lucifer. And so there are like 72 shapes within this, basically something that looks kind of like a modern art work, mural. And there's also kind of an altar there that's made out of solid iron. And, from the top looking down, it looks like a one eye on the top of a pyramid. So, somebody put some thought and detail into that particular room that, if you didn't know anything about the occult, you would just think it's a strange room, but if you were, it would be, just this temple to all kinds of occult ideals and philosophies, and there's all kinds of ornate meanings that are in there that the initiated eye or somebody who is given an understanding of the room would understand. Excuse me, I just sneezed. So somebody would understand if they were given the kind of code book to the room.
I tell you what. If we can switch gears now, but before we do, to talk a little bit about what you now have coming up, I'll have to say that I hit the Masons pretty heavy in years gone by because of all this symbolism, which seems to be somewhat preserved in some of their higher degrees. Okay, we understand it, I get it. But I have to say, though, that sometimes I think that laying it all on Masonry is kind of like a deliberate hangout, a definite detour down a side street, because this, and I'm going to ask you to speak to this. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay, no problem. But all this does go back, though, doesn't it? To, Babylon, Egyptian sun god worship. This stuff has been with us for all time.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's more than Masonry. Masonry kept some of it, kept some of its secrets, and some of it's done. But to me, it's much broader. Like when I learned about Crowley and how diverse he was. And how he was, he went back to Babylon himself, and he believed in everything, all worship is solar and phallic, and, things that were for me, outside of Masonry. I think that, and most of the people that Crowley associated with are people who had passed through Masonry. So they were 33rd degrees, but they went beyond it. So I see the real influential people as people who have been initiated into more than one society, who are really pretty much hardcore occultists, who have done Masonry and OTO and their own magic and read other books and, are part of kind of what would be called Mystery Babylon, I guess.
One thing I want to ask you, I think you're aware of the Informer.
Yes.
And the ATG site went down. We're trying to pull stuff out just to preserve it so it can be read. I didn't really go into this too much, and I don't know that it's a place that or a subject that one should spend all that time with. But I'm going to throw it out to you just because we've been talking about New York and such, and everything that's taken place there. Do you believe at all that that New York might be the Babylon spoken about in Revelation?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't know. I mean, it has that element of Babylon, like when the people are railing against Babylon. But to say that it is not something. Maybe it's its modern incarnation. I've always thought the place is a little strange and a little creepy. I'm from the Midwest and I'm in California, so I always got a strange feeling about New York. But I really don't know. I mean, it seems, like I said, it seems to encapsulate a lot of its principles, ancient Babylon's principles.
I kind of think it isn't one city. I think it's a system. But that's why I asked you, because I mean, I don't know. I don't know that it's that important. But the one thing is, we do know that Scripture says it's going to be, it's going to be done away with. So, I mean, that's all that really matters, I think, in a certain sense. Now, moving away, if we could, to what I guess is this going to be a series, The Doctrine of Silence in the New World Order?
Yeah, well, it'll be like a 7-page kind of, 1,000-word document with some pictures, just like the one I did on Rockefeller, but just kind of putting together some concepts for people to kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from and why. Basically the basic premise of the paper that I'm going to put out is the importance of silence in the elite and in the American aristocracy, and show how this kind of idea of silence suffuses their view of the world and how they keep their knowledge, and also how it's infused into the buildings and architecture of the places they spend time at.
Is it your belief, and I have to say it's probably mine, that as much as people want to believe that the New World Order is going to get kicked in the shin, it'll be turned around and spanked, and it's not that I don't want to put up opposition as such, and I guess I've lost some friends because I'm saying, look, I mean, this thing is very well developed, and we don't even know what we're dealing with, and to go ahead and try to duke out with it, I mean, it's just not going to work. There's other things that we should be doing because we are not of this world, and I don't think, well, I know we can't stop what's coming. A lot of people don't believe that, in fact, is true. But besides that, and if you want to speak to that afterwards, fine. But the question I would ask you is this. What struck me about what you did with the Doctrine of Silence in the New World Order, what it brings home to me is the fact that these characters are so dedicated, and they have been generationally involved in this, and that they, quote, can keep a secret. And that is why the advances that they have made have been so successful. And I have to say, I don't see it being abrogated in the least, but go ahead, William.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it is generational. I think that it is a long-range plan. I think that it defines them as the kind of an elite class, as opposed to a more equitable society. Even in the early Christendom, there was an attempt to share goods and to get away with property and class distinctions, and you can see that with the early apostles. And I think that these people are the exact opposite. They want to solidify distinctions. They want to keep power and knowledge for themselves, and one of the way they do that is to maintain a code of silence and reinforce that code of silence. And it goes back even to the occult, and it goes back into the ancient gods. They use the gods Harpocrat or Harpocrates, which is a Greek god of silence, and Harpocrat is a kind of a god form of the god Horus, so there's your occult tie there. But basically they use these symbols as a reason to keep quiet for a variety of reasons, not only for their political connections, but also for what they do when they're out of the public eye. And you see these statues and symbols of this silence, or the gesture of silence, for example, and you'll see this in my writing at Skull and Bones, at Bohemian Club, and famous people make that sign of silence frequently, but the rest of the world doesn't really know how to interpret it. I certainly didn't, but as I learned more, I saw it as much more of a common occurrence.
Well, I've been involved in looking at this stuff for, I guess, about 10 years or so. That never dawned on me. How did it hit you what started this, the fact that you realized that throughout the centuries, preserved in paintings and in sculptures, that we had this finger to the pursed lips?
Well, it was just like seeing the correlation. Oh, it's there. So I did some studying for when I wrote my book on Crowley. I did something about the Hellfire Club because Crowley started his own Hellfire Club. And at the original Hellfire Club that was in England in the late 18th century, at the entrance into it, Dashwood's Hellfire Club is they had the statue of Harpocrates. So you're supposed to be quiet. And then one of Crowley's God forms, and one of the things that he did was to have the sign of silence. And I have that in the paper that I'm going to put out. And so this is a concept and idea that goes back at least 250 years, and it might have even gone back into ancient history for all I know. I just haven't been able to study or make that correlation, but it just dawned on me by seeing these similar gestures by different people. So, and these statues, one of the interesting uses of this sign of silence is at Bohemian Club, where they were given a statue of St. John of Nepomuk making the gesture of silence, and they keep it at the Bohemian Club's downtown office on Taylor. I think it's on Taylor and Sutter, or Taylor. Can't remember the cross street, but they wheel it out from the club to the Grove, which is about 45 minutes north from downtown San Francisco every year, and they carefully install it, and they apparently hold meetings in front of it and emphasize the need for discretion during the Grove. So that's kind of reinforced. And there was a discourse that Alex Jones once had with this guy David Gergen, who was a...
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, go ahead, but talk about it.
Well, it's interesting because they didn't have a meeting of minds. Gergen assumed, if you go back and listen to that, Gergen assumed that Jones had made an oath of silence. So he was talking to him, well, aren't you supposed to be quiet? And Jones didn't get it because he doesn't know anything about the Code of Silence. He doesn't know anything about... what the Grovers do and about their code of, discretion. So he's talking, but Gergen thinks that he's one of them, and so he's breaking their oath. And if you go back and listen to that, you can see the discourse takes on a different character when you understand that Gergen, has clearly made his gesture or oath of silence.
Well, and thinking back to that, I'm just going to try to approximate the words unless you know them, but didn't he say something about, you broke the arrangement or something like that? Yeah,
so he says something like that, so it's clear that there's a code of silence at the Grove. I don't know what the arrangement is. I don't have the detailed inside knowledge, but my guess is that it has something to do with making a vow of silence. Well,
not to hammer on him, but then that puts in a different light how he was able to get in. Now you got to wonder if he was allowed to get in. He played it off like he sneaked in, and then if he did it like somebody who crawls under the fence, why would Gergen know about that? But if he was allowed to go in and made it look like it was clandestine to us, and then Gergen says that to him, now you got to wonder if his original reportage in the Grove was all that, under the fence.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know.
That's a strange thing. The other thing I wanted to ask you before we close it up, and now that you've done what you've done with the Code of Silence and such, and there's one other thing about this too. In Scripture, it kind of details that there are certain things that just aren't good, and one of them I think is a winking eye, if I got that right. And I put anything that seems secret, although some secrecy had to take place, we understand that, with the spies in the Old Testament and such. But it's almost like the winking of the eye, what happens when night falls, and this kind of shh, don't tell. it all doesn't really have anything that can, in any way, shape, or form, be beneficial to people of the light. Your take on that?
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, these people keep things secret because their works are evil. They know they are, but they want to keep them secret because it would denude their power and authority over others if they disclosed exactly what was going on. So I do see that, the secrecy is an element of the occult and evil. I mean, I think that, Christ basically kind of commanded us to do our works in the light because they're good, but the secret things are typically the evil ones, and that's why those people will never really become authentic Christians, because they don't want their evils to come to light. And the kind of perversions and things that take place at the Grove and Skull and Bones, are not anything those people would ever want to make public.
I'm going to ask you this as an outro, just to see how you feel about this. I know some people have done work in this area. I think there's more to be done, and I think it has to be a lot franker, if you will. But when you take a look at all of that you spoke to today, especially with that takes place in New York, and I also think about Chicago too, where there's a Rockefeller influence in the U of Chicago being somewhat of kind of their think tank.
Yeah, if not a total think tank for them, actually.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I mean, I'm couching what I was saying, but I have to agree with you, especially when I see some of the stuff that's come out of there actually through the whole century. But
well, I was educated at a kind of adjunct University of Chicago school that, that's a whole nother show to see what they thought. I mean, they basically had it right off the Rockefeller playbook where individual rights are actually monetized so that the rights are actually not divisible, the rights are not independent entities in themselves. They're always tied into some need for money.
yes,
And so like justice and liberty are really somebody clamoring for more cash, and I mean that's right out of the Rockefeller playbook, but that's an aside.
well, I tell you, that's great stuff. If you ever want to do that, please come my way with that. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's funny
And that's
because
University of Chicago 101, and a lot of the lawyers who come out of University of Chicago get bombarded with that. It's called law and economics. It's a field within the law that, you don't have a choice but to study it if you go to Chicago or some other schools that are what are called right-wing. But that's a whole other story.
yeah, maybe sometime too, along the lines of that, I'd love to hear what you had to say about D.C. There's a lot of people who give a real pass to our founding fathers, but I can't understand how in the world you can absolutely festoon that district, and even all the other icons like our flags and such, with occult symbolism, and just give everybody a pass that, we didn't know that was happening. So.
Yeah, I mean that's another hour-long thing. I mean, you can talk about the House of the Temple there, which is like basically an Egyptian, central Egyptian architectural central hub for high-level masons, which I used to walk by when I was living there and just stare at it at awe, like where did this thing come from? What is going on here? So, I could probably just do a whole series on the. I think that Tex Mars has done some work on that. I should look at his stuff, but he's actually done some work on all these weird, odd Masonic buildings all throughout the United States.
And it really gets down to also the one thing too, and that is, why does the star have 5 points? I look up in the sky; it doesn't look like it has 5 points to me. So there you go.
Yeah.
I won't let you go down that road unless you want to. So, all right, no, you got to run. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Again, it's William Ramsey. The website is occult911.com. The link to the Rockefeller symbolism will be up there. Links to his site, and you can find out about the book, the PDF, also about the DVDs. So thanks so much for coming on, William. I appreciate it, and I hope you can get around a little bit more with that, because you did a good work, and obviously there's more to come. Thank you.
For sure. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye, William.